Good afternoon. My name is Cassandra Koenen. I'm coming to you from Toronto today. I'm the VP of Digital Strategy and Client Services with Haft, a design and branding agency here in Toronto. And I'm really excited to be able to talk to you this afternoon about social media and hopefully giving you a couple of tips and tricks, depending on where you are in your journey, whether you're at the beginning or whether you're further along. Hopefully I'll be able to give you some knowledge today. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen and we'll get started. So what we're hoping to talk about today is expanding your social reach, as I said, and giving you a little bit of tips about how to engage with social media and how to do your social media planning. And I think what we first want to talk about is, for nonprofits with really limited resources, both human resources and financial resources, it's not surprising that your social media strategy probably doesn't rise to the top of the agenda when you're thinking about your day or your week. And it's not a priority for most of us. And if this sounds familiar, believe me, you're not alone. About 67% of nonprofits who were surveyed really don't have a documented social media strategy, and even less than half of those nonprofits are using social media to are measuring their actual results. And we know that social media can greatly improve the results overall of the organization, your engagement and your goals. But in order for social media efforts to be worthwhile, it is important that you implement a strategy that outlines your goals, your plans, and your successes for tracking. Without measuring it, the true impact really will never be, it will be a challenge. And really, social media should be considered just one component of your, and I'm sure you do, of your integrated marketing plan. So assuming that your organization already has a marketing strategy in place, taking the time to outline your social media strategy is important. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, we'll have covered everything that you'll need to develop your social media strategy and to be able to measure the success. So the first step in defining your social media strategy is to decide, what are your goals? What are you hoping to achieve? Is it fundraising? Is it advocacy? Is it knowledge sharing? And like any planning or marketing that you're doing, keeping your vision and mission of your organization top of mind is really key to that strategy. And with the overarching frame in mind, thinking through what are the specific goals of your social media posts should be the next step. So as I said, is it advocacy? Is it fundraising? Is it knowledge sharing? And if you're not sure about what those goals are, here are some really like the top 6 social media outcomes to consider. Is it about driving traffic to your website? Is it about generating community engagement? Do you want to recruit more volunteers? Do you want to acquire and retain your donors? Is there a donor stewardship piece to it? Are you wanting to cultivate more brand awareness? Or are you wanting to use your social channels to establish thought leadership for your organization in the space? And once you've kind of figured out what you want to accomplish, you can really better decide what types of content that you're going to post. So keeping your goals and posts fluid and flexible throughout the weeks and months will also be important as you respond to external factors, right? When things are happening in the world. But really, you want to keep that end goal in sight. And if you do this, your content will stay targeted and you will see better results. So remembering, whoops, there you go, sorry. Remembering that this is public-facing media representing the entirety of your organization, its voice and its brand. You really want to think about who to involve in that process. And I think that we fall to leaving it to our digital teams. We fall to leaving it to our communications teams, when really you want to involve as many of your staff and your stakeholders as possible, because they're consumers of the media, as well as they represent a variety of the voices and diversity of voices in your organization. So if you involve everyone to help formulate your objectives and your strategies, you'll end up with a better result. And as I said, it's easy just to leave it up to your digital team. You know, we all have our roles to play in an organization, and they certainly have the expertise on the best tactics and practices to use. But having everyone's voice at the table will make your plan more fulsome and more strategic in the long run. And much like defining the goal of your post, it's important to create a certain set of benchmarks that you're going to be able to help define your success for your campaign, so that you're not just putting things out into the void and not understanding how people are engaging with that content. Here's a couple of metrics that you may want to consider. Increase newsletter opt-ins. You can run lead generation campaigns through social media, more event participation, new volunteer registration, increase your website traffic, or the number of followers, likes, or fans if you're trying to just build your social media presence in general. And so a few things to kind of keep in mind when you're building your measuring process is you want to make sure that your metrics align with the goals and directly link to them. For example, if your goal is to drive website traffic, you'll want to measure the number of website visits after posting on social media and linking it to your webpage, which makes sense. Your metrics should be quantifiable so that you can gather concrete evidence to further guide your social media strategy. And you want to pay attention to the timing. Did you notice the number of newsletter opt-ins surge in any particular week following your Facebook post? You'll want to record and compare metrics within the days and weeks before and after posting on social media, so you can accurately attribute the change to your social media efforts. And Google Analytics does a great job of tracking, as long as you set it up, of tracking what social drives to your site. And you'll also be able to adjust your strategy based on the types of content that is working. So as I said, you want to make sure that you're staying fluid with your end goal in mind. And really, it's not about seeing instantaneous results. You may see immediate spikes, but don't get discouraged if your progress takes some time. It's important to keep trying. It's important to keep posting, and really just always evaluating your content and see what is actually working. You can record your metrics using a spreadsheet, whether, with data entry points such as start date, entry data, number of email subscribers, followers, likes, etc. And as I said, I'm sure your websites are already using Google Analytics to track your activity on your site, so you'll be able to gather a lot of data from that. You'll also be able to measure social media website referrals, which will track and report on how your volunteers are finding your site, which is important as well. And we have some samples further down in the presentation, and we'll be sharing that if you're interested in how to set those things up. So one of the things, if you're just starting out, again, depending on where you are in your journey, is you really need to think about developing a social media policy for your volunteers and your staff. The internet and social media in particular, now more than ever, is, as we all know, is a really complicated place. We're seeing how social media is used to spread misinformation, and can sow the seeds of distrust. So it's important to establish your own social media policy for your organization that advises your staff and your volunteers on how to use the designated social media channels and your expectations of their behavior on those sites. It's important to safeguard against inappropriate. It's important to safeguard your organization against inappropriate behavior. You may want to conduct some staff training for your staff and interns or volunteers on that social media policy usage and your strategy. And having your documented policy and guidelines public and transparent and enforced is really important, because it's one thing to develop it, but it's important to enforce them as well, to ensure a good experience online for your visitors to your social channels. So once you've got your strategy decided, or you think you know where you want to go with your goals, you have your social media policy ready to go, the next thing you want to think about is what is that right channel for those goals? And it may not be the same thing for each goal. So the social media space is extremely crowded, as we all know. There's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, Yammer, Vimeo, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, and those are just a few of them. And the list these days seems really endless. So how do you choose the right one for your organization? Diversifying your social media presence is generally a good idea. However, if you don't have the time and resources, which smaller organizations don't, to maintain the numerous platforms, it's really important to find the ones that are going to be most relevant to your audience. So Twitch, for example, is probably not one. Facebook probably is. And if you're just starting out and you're feeling overwhelmed, I would recommend choosing one or two channels to focus on. If you find you're managing well, then you can add one more or another, or one or two more. And it really depends on where your audiences are, and that's where you need to be. Um, so, for example, we just finished a campaign for an organization here in Toronto, and Facebook and Instagram, we assumed that there were two types of audiences: a parent audience and a teacher audience that we were looking at. It became very clear in the course of that campaign that our teachers were on Instagram and our parents were on Facebook, and this was not something that we assumed. Um, is not something that we assumed when we started that campaign. So again, it's really thinking about where might your audiences be and what that channel could do for you. Um, if going to your volunteers is a really good first step to kind of find out where they are, and it might require a little research, but you can get a relatively accurate sense of where your supporters and prospects are based on their demographics. So an individual's age tends, but doesn't necessarily guarantee, to dictate where they spend time online. In the next few slides, we'll kind of break down the top 5 platforms that nonprofits tend to spend most of their resources on, and their popularity based on those key demographics. Think about surveying your supporters. If you do a regular newsletter, maybe send out include a quick Survey Monkey or a survey in that to find out more about what your supporters, how your supporters want to reach you. You can just ask, right? As you bring on new volunteers, survey them to gather reliable data and the type of social media that they use. And as I said, the same can be done with your supporters and donors. So really, it's just asking a quick engagement survey, and you can include that whether you have a welcome series or, as I said, in a monthly newsletter. But just really find out the people who have the highest affiliation, your volunteers, your donors, your supporters, where do they live online? And another thing to think about is what are other similar organizations using? So if you have whether they're competitors or similar organizations in the field, what types of contents are they posting? What posts and interactions are successful, kind of based on how many people interact with that post that they're doing? So it's just doing a little background research to help kind of find out where your people live. So let's kind of start breaking down the top 5, and none of these are going to be surprising to any of you, I'm sure. Definitely for most nonprofits, Facebook continues to be a strong platform for engagement, donors, and list buildings. It's of course, I think, a challenge for all of us because we all understand the negative side of Facebook and what that brings. But the reality is, as a nonprofit, that is where we have really high engagement for these things. In a recent survey, over 98% of nonprofits are using Facebook, and it engages really the widest demographic of all of the top social media platforms out there. So unless your audience demographic is under 25, which it may be, this really is the place for most of your supporters that spend some of their time online. And on top of all of that, it's a dedicated platform. It has a dedicated platform just for nonprofits. So there are extra resources available for you. So if you're short on resources and can only service one platform, probably Facebook would be your smart bet. And we would also recommend making sure that you're listed as part of Facebook's nonprofit program. If you aren't already, it will allow your supporters to create fundraisers on your behalf. I'm sure you've all been asked to support to a birthday fundraiser for a friend or something else on Facebook. And while you don't get all the data as a fundraiser that you would necessarily want, it can be a genuine stream of income with very few resources needed. So again, if you aren't part of that program yet, definitely think about doing that. And then using the in-app lead generation tool that they have, if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, can be an efficient way to build your lists and other lead generation campaigns. So whether it might be an advocacy ask, it doesn't necessarily have to be just about signing up for your newsletter, but it could be if you're wanting to sign up, to challenge a politician or a new policy or something like that. Their contact information is automatically populated, so it's a very easy, user-friendly process for the supporter to get engaged. So they don't have to type anything out, they don't have to add anything. So it really makes for an easy ask and can generate some good list building, and then you're able to just to download it from your account as an Excel and as an Excel file and load it into your CRM system. And one thing to note, though, with you may have been following the battles between Apple and Facebook around privacy and the ability to track users' activity around the web and then retarget for marketing ads. So, you know, we joke about it here in the office where you click on one website and the next thing you know, you're getting stalked around the web by a variety of similar type organizations or that association or organization in and of itself. So we all understand how it works. Apple has chosen to make the decision to protect people's privacy. So now it becomes an issue in remarketing because your activity, if you decide that you do not want an app to track you around the web via Apple's ask, which just FYI, 92% of people are saying, yes, I don't want you to track me around the web. It then means that that supporter is kind of blindly on your site. So your ad, your activity could be generating, it could be driving to the site, they could be taking action on the site, but you will not be able to attribute it to the specific activity that you had planned. So that's just something to be aware of. We've added an article again later down in the slides that explains these changes. It's really quite helpful in explaining these changes if you haven't been following along. But as I said, like over 90% of iOS 14 users are saying, no, I don't want you to follow me around the web, and it will change. It will change the way that we engage for sure going forward. One way to mitigate any potential dip in conversions that is to make is on Facebook is to create a lookalike audience based on what's your own house email list. So you would take your own house email list, load it up into Facebook. It then creates a lookalike audience based on what they can tell from those users online. So they take the email address in Facebook and they understand what those people have been doing online, and they build a lookalike audience for you. So that's another way, if you don't want to do a widespread campaign, that you can be very targeted to people that are already engaged with you and get around this privacy issue. And I see that there are questions coming, and if it's okay, I'll answer them after the end of the presentation, if that's all right. So that's Facebook. The next one up is Instagram, and of course, Instagram is owned by Facebook. So if you're going to pick two channels, these would probably be the easiest two to marry together because you can do a lot of cross-posting. If it's about time, you can post to your Instagram channel from your Facebook Business Manager account now. And if you're on Instagram, you can post back to your Facebook. So again, if you're not quite sure where your audiences are and you want to get on these two popular channels, it's very easy to do that these days. Instagram's demographics do skew younger than Facebook, and it's more likely where you'll find the millennial and Gen Z crowd, for sure. Chances are that you have an Instagram account of your own, and you know that it's a very visual platform. Every post must feature an image or a video, and therefore it's highly engaging. Instagram is a great place for announcing initiatives, for calling for volunteers, for sharing event photos. And you'll definitely want to think about the visual aesthetic that you are creating that will engage and inspire your followers. So using the carousel feature to tell a story over a number of images or as text images to get important across can be very engaging for your audience. I talk about this a lot in my personal life, and I'll share it with you as well. If you aren't following a channel online called On Canada Project, so ON Canada Project, this is a young organization that started up to actually deal with misinformation around COVID in Ontario for the millennial and Gen Z generation. So if that is your audience, I highly recommend following these guys because they've taken their millennials and Gen Z who are writing for millennials and Gen Z. So that they tend to attack things in a little different way than those of us who are a little older and have been at this a while. So it's and one of the things they do is they use this carousel. You can see in the I'm pointing, you can't see me pointing, but you can see in the graphic that we have, they use a lot of text and they tell us tell a story with their carousels, and the Instagram carousel platform allows for that. And it's a really interesting thing to think about if you have a lot of information you want to impart. So, I think for a long time have learned it's short and sweet on the web. And these guys are kind of turning that a little bit on its head and saying, well, it doesn't need to be as short and sweet as you think. And as long as it's visually appealing and engaging, they're getting the message out there. So again, it's an organization I've been following for a little bit now, and I would recommend, if that's your demographic, or if you're interested in testing out that kind of information, I highly recommend giving them a look. And Instagram stories are another great way to engage, which I'll talk about a little bit more a few slides down, when we talk about engaging. On this platform, you'll want to think, instead of your organization's brand voice, you'll also want to consider your nonprofit's image and how the types of pictures and images that you choose also represent your organization and engage your desired audiences. So if you can use Instagram effectively, you can improve your positive brand recognition, increase your supporter base, and really create some interesting shareable content. And one of the other images that we have here is from Color of Change. And again, it's another interesting one to follow if you haven't, because again, they just really use color and design to really get their messages to pop. And I think are doing a great job of using graphics to get their messages out on Instagram. So then if we move down to Twitter, I think Twitter is a perfect space for you to advocate for the issues that are important to your mission, right? To be the leading voice in your community and to build and cultivate a supporter base. Here's a few things Twitter allows nonprofits to do: reach new audiences, obviously, stay relevant to the discussions and the latest news and events that affect your organization, build relationships with experts and influencers and like-minded organizations in your field. And that's really important in the Twitter space, is really being a part of the broader conversations. And as we all know, that is, again, there's difficulties with Twitter with some of the conversations, but you really can build a conversation around like-minded organizations or around like-minded topics here in a way that it's not as easy to do on some of the other platforms. And it's the easiest place to share your research and your organization's activities with your supporters instantly. For advocacy and research-based organizations in particular, Twitter's a platform that attracts lively debate, as I said, in discussion. You definitely want to be aware of the trolls, but it can be a great space to inform your audiences on your issues and mobilize supporters to act. So again, if something is happening in the world that you need to get people to move on really quickly, Twitter really is one of the spaces that really can get that going. As we all know, and we've seen on a variety of things in our lives really quickly. And if some of your target audiences are thought leaders and elected officials or journalists, really, this is the platform where they live. This is the platform where they engage. And in order to be a part of the latest, because they want to be a part of the latest news and conversations. So this is a great space to follow them, to engage with them, to try and get into conversations with them. So when you're thinking through on Twitter the types of content that you may want to post, obviously share news and timely content. 56% of Twitter's users use the platform to get their news, which is much higher than any other social network. Video rules in just about every social media platform. So tweets with videos get 10 times the engagement. And watching video is the #3 reason that people use Twitter. Make your tweets retweetable. Share valuable links and media, tag people that you want to take part in your conversations and ask for retweets. Don't be shy to do that. And really to be interactive, live tweet at an event or conference. So in a conference like this, a lot of people will live tweet these kinds of sessions, ask questions, take part in Twitter chats or have Twitter chats. Um, these live chats, whether they're planned or spontaneously joining into one, really assist in bringing in new followers and jumping into timely discussions that haven't necessarily reached other platforms yet. So while news goes like wildfire across social media, it does tend to percolate a little bit on Twitter before it moves on to the rest of them. And then just to kind of point out again with some of the graphics that we have on our slide, that the top slide is like a quick retweet from Glad. Someone they follow tweeted out something, and all they did was basically say, this. So it doesn't, again, I think with Twitter, you don't have to overthink it sometimes, and it can be a way to engage in a quick and easy way to stay relevant to conversations. And then we've pulled out, again, it's important to have a lot of color, a lot of visual stimulating images as well to grab people's attention as they're going through their long scrolls of what they follow. And then yeah, and just finally, it's post personal content. It's a pretty informal social network, so don't be afraid to use humor and share memes and gifs. It doesn't always have to be serious. So just kind of think of that as you're working through your strategies as well. So the next one I just want to talk about is LinkedIn, and I think we're starting to see more and more that organizations are posting more of their content in LinkedIn beyond it just being a professional networking site. I'm sure most of you have LinkedIn, if not all of you, and know that it's a professional networking tool that's trusted by businesses and nonprofits and employees and professionals. It's definitely an effective business-to-business communication tool, and it's a great choice for your organization if you're looking to strengthen partnerships with universities or local businesses, their employees, or other nonprofits. You can also use a post thread, right? So that's part of what the features are, and it's great for sharing content like links and videos, thought leadership articles. Again, if you're trying to build an audience for your leaders, so to put their voice out into the world, LinkedIn and Twitter are probably the best places to do that. If you have case studies, if you have research, this is the kind of content that we're seeing more and more on LinkedIn, and I think is proving to be a valuable resource to engage that professional audience, and perhaps is where you would see maybe your more major donors or influencers that you would want to bring on to establish your credibility. If you're looking to partner with researchers or scientists, this is a really good platform to build those audiences, and make sure that you're building up your profile, your organization's profile on the platform as well, so that you can gather followers and have those kinds of engagements. So those are the platforms that, again, depending on where you are, if you're thinking through where are my resources best, those are the platforms that we would recommend the most to think through for the nonprofits. But the next thing you want to think about is how you manage all of that, whether it's one or two, or if you do decide for four, how do we manage all of that social media with minimal resources? And one of the best ways to do that, obviously, is with a calendar or a schedule to plan those posts ahead of time. Because I think the other reality of social media is it can suck up your entire day. You can start posting and commenting and looking at likes, and the next thing you know, hours and hours have gone, and none of us have the time for that. So if we're able to pre-schedule, spend time at the beginning of the week, beginning of the month, to pre-schedule a number of posts, then I think it helps manage the process overall. There's some tools that we're sharing a little later down on the tip sheet that will help manage with that scheduling. Some are free, some are paid, and social media is the most effective when you can update it regularly. So it's not something that you want to post something at the beginning of the month and then not post again for 3 weeks. So you do want to get into a rhythm for it. And again, creating a schedule can help make sure that you're posting often enough and switching up your content to maintain engagement and build your audiences. So when we're talking about creating engaging content visuals, your social media strategy will likely center around engagement to increase traffic to your site, drive action and activism, increase supporters and reach and generate a new stream of income. And in order to accomplish those goals, your content should be varied and engaging. So keep things visually engaging. Great images garner great results. Viewers respond better, and you'll generate 95% more post views by adding compelling visual content. Consider incorporating visual storytelling into your social media strategy. But it doesn't just mean photos, it means infographics, it means videos and other images to keep your channels interesting. As we talked about with the On Canada project, infographics and a carousel post on Instagram do a great job in telling a compelling story. There are a number of free design tools like Canva that are a great resource for creating infographics, ads, logos, and more. They have templates for all of the social media platforms and all of the forms. It also has free videos, free music, icons, photos that can help create fantastic content. So if you don't have that stuff in-house, that's a great tool to be able to achieve those things. And just a couple of ideas for your next social media post to keep in mind. Photos of happy volunteers participating in an initiative. Your supporters love to know who the people are behind the scenes. That's one of the things. I've worked for the nonprofit sector for about 25 years, and more than anything, people love to know the people behind the scenes. A digital poster or an image announcing your big event. So again, not just keeping it in the text, but having something visually captivating. Maybe a video montage of your volunteers or staff sharing what they love to do about working for your organization. A video message from your CEO, your leadership, or your community members who love to do, comment on the work that you do. Sometimes just an inspirational quote in an artful font can be very captivating. And hop on days like I'm just going to use this example, National Cat Day, with pictures of your staff as pets as an example. On the screen, there's one with the hearts that was on Rainbow Bridge Day, and we asked supporters for a volunteer group that I work with to send us pictures of cats that they had lost, and we did a collage for them, and people loved that. They loved being able to do that. So think about those things. Think about using the Instagram lives, the Twitter lives, or the Facebook lives. They just they're not that hard to figure out. And again, people really love engaging with people. So it can be a casual conversation, or it can be a more thoughtful one with community members or influencers or your major donors. But something to think about. And make it interactive. Most social media platforms have a fun way of creating interactive content, like Twitter polls, Instagram stories, Q&As, this or that, reaction scales. As I said, the Instagram lives and the Facebook lives, and sharing your supporters' post and Instagram stories and adding stickers and emojis. So if someone tags you, making sure that you're resharing that in stories and adding a little thank you or heart eyes or something like that to know that you appreciate them. The Facebook surveys that we talked about a little earlier. These are the kinds of things that you can really, again, make social media a two-way conversation, which is really what it's about. It's not about just pushing out content. It's about engaging with your audiences, which is our next slide. So it's important to remember that it is a two-way conversation, and your job isn't finished after you've uploaded that post. It's important to engage with your followers and fans. It will help build that brand loyalty, and they certainly notice when you ignore them. So you want to make sure that you're listening to what the supporters have to say. More and more of your volunteers are using social media channels to ask questions about you, express interest and share their opinions about what you're doing. and it's crucial that you don't ignore them. So make sure you have time in your social media calendar to answer those questions and respond to that. And then finally, you just want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on that progress. So again, measurement is important. We don't want to be talking into a void. Keep checking in on your metrics, identifying the types of content that's working and not working, reviewing your processes, policies as needed, and make sure you continue to be realigned with your goals. And as I said, we're going to share this deck. So these are all links, but we have a social media strategy template for you, social media policy template, and analytics template, some great scheduling tools that I mentioned. Hootsuite is obviously one, Sprout Social is one, and Later. All of them have a free model. So again, depending on how active you are, one of those should work. These are some links directly to on these platforms where they specifically help nonprofits, if that's helpful. A link to Canva if you haven't yet discovered that, and again a link to the situation with Apple's iOS changes and what that means. It's a really great article to explain all that. So with that, I will say thank you for listening to me blabber on, and I'm going to answer some of these questions. So let me just make sure I don't miss any. How do we best protect from hackers or having our platforms corrupted? We worry a lot about trust of our supporters. That's a great question. I can honestly say that in the 25 years I've worked in the nonprofit world, and I've mostly worked in the digital space since the early 2000s. We've never been hacked. I've never been in a situation where our organization has been hacked. I think it's obviously a concern, but as long as you're changing your passwords, as long as you're being vigilant about the kind of privacy in your broader IT organization, I think you should be okay. I know that's not a great answer, but to be honest, I think it's what you have to pay more attention to is people commenting in the comments that is racist or homophobic or any of those things that you absolutely don't want, because it's amazing what triggers people these days. And so it's making sure you have a solid policy that you clearly say that is unacceptable and we will take that down. So that's probably a bigger problem than being hacked, is making sure you're keeping an eye on the comments and responding to that. Are there any free resources that you would recommend for those of us who don't have a lot of money for trading on social media skills? Yes. So some of those free resources we've already shared. I will say that LinkedIn has an amazing amount of free resources just in general on a lot of digital marketing, on a lot of digital things. And I would highly recommend going through some of theirs. N10, so the not-for-profit technology organization, it's n10.org, also has a lot of resources. They're a great one to look through. Yeah, those would kind of be the places I would start in terms of some of those things, but we have tried to provide some free resources for you. And then the last one I have is paid for advertising worth investing in? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's worth investing in if you have a budget. It does not have to be a large budget. It really is about you may want to test some messaging, right? It may be worth doing digital advertising if your organization wants to test a couple of different campaign ideas before it goes out to the bigger audience, and you just want to put a little bit of money against it. I would highly recommend, if you don't have a lot of large budgets but you want to increase your reach, is to put a little bit of money aside, and when you have a really important post, that you boost it. Because of the algorithms, particularly in Facebook, the way the algorithms work, it's really hard to get your content into people's feeds at the top. So like if you spend, like, hypothetically $25, $50 on a 24 or 48 hour boost, your reach will often go from 2,000, like, again, hypothetically 2,000, to it can expand up to like 20,000 people reach. So especially when you're doing fundraising, especially if you're trying to raise funds and you don't have money to do a large digital buy, I absolutely would recommend the Boost post to do that. Again, I volunteer for a cat rescue group, and the results are the difference of we'll raise $500 on a social post versus we've raised $5,000 or $6,000 after spending $50 on a boost. So I would highly recommend doing that. So I think, Phaedra, if I'm not wrong, those were all of the questions, unless anyone else has anything else. No. Okay. I think that's it then. Thank you again. And oh, one thing I will mention is that we have some lovely Zoom backgrounds. If you go to our exhibit in the exhibit hall, it's if you're feeling the need for a little bit of funky mood, we have an animated one and as well as a static one. So if you're a child of the 70s and 80s, like I am, think of a mood ring. We've put something there to brighten your day a little bit. I thought it'd be a little too distracting today, or I would have put it on here. But go take a peek in our exhibit hall and feel free to download that from us.